This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and we have a shared vision for success in business and our personal lives. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we'll discuss how authenticity is a critical component to our personal philosophies, how we define authenticity, why it's so important to us, why you may be less authentic than you think you are, and much more. But first, we like to start each episode with a brief update on where we're at in our business and personal lives so that when we look back on these episodes in the future, we can kind of gauge roughly where we are in our lives. Where are you at business this week?
Business this week, not too much progress since our last podcast, since this is kind of an odd recording week or 2 weeks for us in preparation for the Christmas New Year holidays.
That's right. It's been 3 days since our last podcast.
Yeah,
So we've got 3 days of business.
Yeah, 3 days of business, a little bit of reading, some small end stuff, but I would say mostly dealing with podcast odds and ends between figuring out why the file type is not working again, to uploading content, to editing content, stuff like that. So that's been a majority of the past 3 days in terms of business. Life-wise, I got a truck fixed up for a friend of mine, which was more hectic than it needed to be, and I wanted it to be. I honestly would have said no to the job, but I told him 6 months ago when I told him he needed brakes that when the time came, I would do them. And so I sat down with myself and I said, okay, am I going to go back on my word and my integrity, or am I going to follow through on something that I don't want to do? And so, or am I going to say no to something that I don't want to do? And so I stuck to my word and integrity and, went through with that job despite the fact that every single ounce of me did not want to do it.
Dude, after seeing those brakes, 6 months ago, he must have had no pads. He must have been driving on only calipers for 6 months.
Yes, 3 out of the 4 corners were metal to metal.
That's autistic.
And the only corner that wasn't metal to metal was about a sneeze away from being metal.
Dude, that's fucking insanity. Yeah. I can't believe that people drive on that.
His rear calipers are fucked too. And I told him, I was like, hey man, like these pistons push back really iffy, and they were some of the most rusted rear calipers I'd ever seen.
That's insane.
And he texted me today and he was like, hey man, like my rear passenger wheel was smoking a little bit and it kind of smells. And I was like, calipers probably
no shit, bro. Yeah.
And because it's like those calipers, once they start to seize and you push them back for new pads, sometimes they don't quite come back the same way.
Right.
And so I was like, just drive it on it a little bit, see if it frees up on you. If it gets worse, essentially what I'll tell him is like, I told you that this would be a problem.
Right.
I told you this is the work I would initially do. I went through with that and did extra by replacing your caliper because you waited so long that you screwed that up too.
Yeah.
At this point, I don't have time and I cannot do this job. Best of luck. Here are 2 or 3 shops that do this kind of work.
What kind of truck is it?
2006 F-150.
Got it.
It's extended cab.
So Autobahn can't do it.
No, and Autobahn wouldn't want to.
Yeah, but you don't want to either.
You don't want to read.
No, guys at Autobahn, they rush it into.
They are.
Yeah, that fucking sucks, dude. Those calipers, those brakes must have been gone 6 months ago when you checked them. Like
they were
6 months ago. You must have been like, you need to get these done this weekend. Don't drive the truck anymore. And then he was like,
and then he drove it up. He has 2 weeks on these brakes.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. Mine are starting to squeal a little bit, but I have just elected to not look at them, and it'll be fine.
It went well for the truck guy, so hopefully it goes for you.
See, because my brakes, the issue is that my brakes might be going. However, I have a nail in my rear tire, so I'm going to have to buy tires sooner rather than later anyways. And also my engine's misfiring because the spark plug is surely cold, and I'm burning oil again. So the fucking brakes are not a huge issue. I'll just engine brake and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Are you using auto oil? I don't think you'd probably not leaking much anymore.
I don't think it's leaking very much at all. I don't see any drips beneath the car, but I think I'm burning it. And I think
you've always burned it though. Like I've always seen a little bit of smoke when you get on it.
Yes. But now it's like I'm back to doing like 1 quart of oil every like 10 days or so ish.
Oh, okay.
So it's not ideal. But also I can tell that it's running like shit because the spark plugs are fouled because it's misfiring like, all the time.
Yeah.
So eventually I'll do the spark plugs, but I'll probably just like ask you to borrow tools while I'm cat sitting or something and not take up everyone's time with it.
Yeah. We'll see.
So yeah, not my brakes aren't a problem. What about your life?
My life in the past 3 days has been doing with this truck. And
Have you enjoyed it?
none at all.
You don't like your life?
Terrible. I had to do it as a house call, which I didn't want to do initially, and there were also other roadblocks by working there, which I didn't anticipate.
Well, you couldn't drive it anywhere.
Right. Well, they also didn't let me leave it up in the air overnight either,
Yeah.
and so I had to reassemble everything.
Did
And
you watch the podcast?
no, he should though.
What a motherfucker. We should take one of the stickers and put it on the truck.
We should.
Overnight.
That's a good
I'll
idea.
do that.
I'll do that.
You brought Fixed and Repaired by Vision 79.
Yes. We're seeing the way forward with Vision 79.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of life, it's been pretty similar. I guess I can give an update on the kratom nicotine stuff.
Sure.
Just for podcast sake.
Sure.
Kratom, I had a tiny 4-ounce tea one of the days, and then it was like 3 or 4 ounces, and then I had like maybe 6 or 8 ounces out of the one that I got as when you were there at the bar. And I drank those 2 throughout the day. That was yesterday, and I actually it felt nice in the moment, like it felt good, like it did hit even that tiny little amount. So like my tolerance is good, but my stomach did feel weird today, and I did feel kind of groggy in the morning. So it definitely does affect me. I do have like a weird style hangover from it. And so I just kind of wanted to see how I reacted to it. I didn't drink any more of it after I got the to-go cup from the bar. But I just kind of wanted to see how I took to it and go from there. But
got like hot girl tummy issues.
it like sucks, dude.
We're like, how are you? And you're like, oh, my stomach hurts.
Legit though, it's pain. It's like real pain.
If it keeps up even after like you're done with everything, like if you haven't had any in like 2 weeks and it's still hurting, probably go to a doctor.
Yeah, I will. But it is very common because all the receptors live in your gut for kratom.
Yeah, sure. But like if you haven't had it in like 2 weeks and it's still
right.
like,
No, I
hurting,
get you.
Yeah.
I think it feels fine now. I just think I stirred it up because I had a little bit.
Got it. Yeah.
So I feel fine now. It was just in the morning I had like this weird style kratom hangover, which I guess I'd never really noticed before because I was drinking it all the time, so I never really got hungover.
Yeah,
like an alcoholic that's like constantly drinking, you never get hungover.
Like senior year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I
never felt hungover because I was always drunk.
That's right.
It's perfect.
We had to kick out a bunch of kids to get this room because we record at Florida Tech. And they were studying for finals. They were like, man, we only had this room for 30 minutes. And I was like, I'm so sorry, guys. I got more important stuff to do. And they were like, I understand. How long have you had this room booked for? And I was like, oh, like 2 weeks. And they were like, wow. And I was like, yeah, I've got a book for next week too. He was like, next week? But this is the last week of finals. And I was like, yeah, we record a podcast and hear it. He was like, oh. And like started packing his stuff up. And I think he was kind of like his ass was burned because he was like, well, I'm studying for a final. Like I'm trying to get a fucking job here.
Yeah, recording a fucking ball and a
podcast. Yeah. You're like, oh, I'm fully employed, graduated, and have a podcast in free time that I use abusing my Florida Tech privileges.
Most valuable Panther.
So yeah, I'm parked in that spot today.
I know.
Statistically.
I was looking forward to it. I had parked under the tree. I was sad.
Yeah.
How about you? Business and life updates.
Okay. I wrote a lot because I know it's only been 3 days, but I wanted to have a bunch of stuff. So I've been doing the real estate course, although funny enough, in the last 3 days, not a ton because I've been doing a bunch of other shit too. But I've been doing like roughly like 40 minutes a day. And then once winter break hits, I'm just going to log in and do like 10-hour days.
I guess.
Just to knock it out.
Yep.
But Grace had a great point. So I'm having to take it online, which sucks. I don't learn well online. I can't read, which is a hindrance. But Grace took it in person and she had the textbook open on her desk as the course teacher was talking about the book, like as he was teaching. And he would comment on the different sections in the book where he was like, this is going to be on our course and this is going to be on the state exam and this is going to be on both. And so Grace like highlighted fucking 80% of this book with like the corresponding color to know what's what. So now as I go through the course, I can have the textbook open next to me. And like as I'm mindlessly reading and not absorbing any of the information, I can check and see if it's actually worthwhile keeping. So that's useful. And then I've been talking to Tyler a lot about it, just like when I bump into him, because now he's like engaged in like the real estate stuff, because Grace and I are both doing it. And he had this really interesting method that he used when he started selling houses, because when you start, you don't have like any leads. So the only way to one of the most common ways to get leads is to do an open house. So your brokerage is like, listen, we're trying to sell this house. Here are the keys. Go sit in the house for like 8 hours and like put up signs, and people will come through and take a look at the house. And so Tyler would take a house that wasn't listed on the market yet, and he would set up his open house signs, and then he would just sit in the house all day and use it like an office. And he would just work in the house. And if someone came in and was like, oh, like, this place is cool, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for, Tyler would have similar listings pulled up on his laptop
Because he's working.
and he would be like, dude, check out this one or this one or this one. And they would go, oh, I like that one. And he goes, oh, sweet. That's 2 neighborhoods away. Let's go. And they would be like, like right now? And he was like, yeah, you're already out looking at houses. And they were like, well, don't you have an open house going on? And he would just pick the sign up out of the front yard and be like, let's go, because it wasn't listed. So the only way people would know about the open house is if they saw the signs. So he would just take the sign real quick and then take them to the next house. And I was like, dude, that's sick. Like, I don't know how to get houses that are like not listed. But then I had an even better idea, because he was also talking about how many signs he puts out. Cause I was like, Grace is putting out like 12 signs, cause the signs are like $15 a sign. So we spent like fucking $150 on signs. He got like 12 of them. So I was like, we're putting out like 12 signs. And he was like, I have 80. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And he was like, yeah, start at the house and then start driving towards the nearest major road, like 95 or US 1, and then just get out and put a sign down on every corner until you get to 95, and do it as many different routes as you can. And I was like, okay, well, that's not a bad idea. But if I'm putting out 80 signs and advertising online and doing all this other shit and having like an 8-hour open house, it's with the intention of having like at least 10 people come through the house that day. So I can't just shut down my operation to go show them a house that very second, right? But if Grace and I partner up, we can both be in the house. One of us can be like stay at the house and like hold down the fort, and the other one can take interested clients out to other houses.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about that idea. He gave me a bunch of
In the luxury turbo Miata.
So that brings me to my life update, which is what I've determined. We talked last
I
week.
planted the perfect segue.
Literally, it's the next thing
I know.
that I figured out. The blue. Okay, so last week we talked about how the Camaro is not the most ideal real estate car, and neither is the Mercedes GT that Greg is getting. So what's a happy middle ground? I was considering a Miata, but I know myself and I know my tastes, and I know that my tastes mean that I'm going to have a Miata with no interior and a turbo kit and a V8 and a big ass rear wing. It's going to be a piss missile. And that's not exactly adult either, right? But the more I researched Miatas and the more I looked into them and learned about them, the more I started to realize like, oh, that's not really what my taste is. Like when I see those cars in the videos, I'm like, that doesn't really get me as excited as I thought it would. I think what does get me excited is a more like closer to what you have, but with more power mods.
Yeah.
So like where you want to go, like a similar vision to where you want to go. I do want a rear wing. I saw this video. Kyle Engineering has the YouTube channel is called Kyle Engineering, and he does CFD analysis of stock cars like Miatas to help you design an aero kit for them. And he did an analysis of the Miata in a bunch of different configurations. So top up, top down, windows up, windows down, full rear wing, and like a little duckbill spoiler. And in all those configurations, the best one is obviously the high wing with a roof. And then the high wing with the roof down is a knock of like 40% downforce or something like that. But the spoiler doesn't do anything in either case because of how steep the slope is on the back of the Miata hardtop. So in any case, if the top is up, then the wing actually works. And if the top is down, it's just for show. But like if the top's down, I'm probably just cruising anyways. So I want a dark blue. The Montego blue is pretty close to what I want. That's the color code for the 95 to 97 M's.
Yep.
Or it was the 95 M color, and then it was an option for like any Miata from 95 to 97. But those are cool. So I'm just kind of meandering into them now. I think I could do the whole build for less than 20 grand, which is one like $500,000 house.
Yep.
And Tyler was talking to me. He was like, if you guys can make 100 phone calls in one day, you'll sell a house within a month for sure. And I was like, okay, 100 phone calls in one day. All I need is like a method of making phone calls, and I can for sure do that. So all I need is to figure out how to do it.
A sales script.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I had the idea of Alex Ramose's sales training is don't ask questions you don't already know the answer to, like any good lawyer, right? And so I started thinking to myself, well, I don't know shit about real estate yet. This course probably won't teach me a whole lot. So I'm probably not going to have all my ducks in a row when I go to make my first sale. How can I circumvent this? Well, first, I can start by writing my sales script ahead of time. And secondly, I had this epiphany with Grace. I was like, why don't you get on ChatGPT and have it role play with you, pretend that ChatGPT is a real estate agent, and then you be your nightmare client. Like they're asking all the hard questions, they're kind of being difficult and they're kind of being assholes, and then have ChatGPT try to sell you on the house anyways, and then tell it to break down the sales strategies it's using on you, and then reverse it and take those for your own.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to be doing that probably over winter break after I finish the course, but before I sign with a brokerage. And then from then on, Tyler was talking about the different ways that you can like get leads and like the different big lists of like phone numbers and house listings and stuff like that. So I'm super excited to get into it. Every day that I'm at work, I hate it and want to be doing this so much more. So it's motivating, which is good. And then my last life update is the president of Space Coast Crew mentioned to Justin the other day about taking an FIT alumni boat to the big fall regatta next year and racing it there. And I was like, I want to be in that boat and I want to build the lineup and I want to race it. So there's potential that we might be going to Charles in the fall to race, which would be pretty cool.
Like you'd actually be in the boat?
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
Yeah. So it would be me and me and Justin, and I think you've met Kyle and Thomas. And then one other guy from my freshman year who I really liked. He had to move to Georgia Tech because they had the major that he wanted, but he lives in the area. He's super cool. But if it's not Charles, then it'll be headed to the south in Georgia.
Cool.
But I'm hoping that we actually take that boat because I would like to get on the water again like once a week and then like train to win something. They brought it up like a week ago and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since, so I'm just excited.
Fair enough.
But yeah, those are my business and life updates. Are you ready for the main topic?
Let's dive into it.
All right. Today's main theme is you are not as authentic as you think you are. Alex Hormozi's definition of authenticity is a strong one, and I've found myself almost not hitting it many times. I think it would be really cool to dedicate an entire episode to his teachings on authenticity to bring attention to the fact that we might not be as authentic and awesome as we might think and why that's the case. So to get us started, do you consider yourself to be authentic while you were growing up?
While I was growing up, I would say no. No.
Why?
Because although my thoughts were ill-conceived, my actions were oftentimes not even aligned with those ill-conceived thoughts. They often were a reflection of what I thought my peers wanted to see from me.
Got it.
And that's fundamentally a lack of authenticity.
Yeah.
At a base level.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you when you were a youngin?
I definitely didn't even consider it. Like I hadn't even thought.
I probably didn't even consider it either.
Yeah.
Looking back on it.
Yeah. Looking back, I think I wasn't the most authentic, but it wasn't for like malicious purposes. I was just the new kid in school and I was like out of shape and pudgy and I had glasses and braces and I didn't have any friends. And one of the guys who I like kind of joked with and got along with, he was fit and in shape and he was funny and he had friends. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm not like gorgeous or in shape, but I could be funny. So I got the iFunny app, which is like where
I used to have that too.
it's where memes started, right?
Yep.
And so I was like, I would find the ones that made me laugh and then I would memorize them. And then the next day in school, I would reference them. And I would try to pass the jokes off as my own. Because I would wait for a moment for one to naturally crop up and then I would say the joke. And then one of the kids who had iFunny would be like, dude, I saw that on like the featured post last night. And I'd be like, yeah, but it was like funny in the moment. And eventually I got fucking bullied for that too. But essentially what it was I was just trying to be more liked by not exactly acting exactly the way that I felt. Like I probably would not have gone and found those jokes naturally.
Right.
So the way that I was feeling and thinking wasn't exactly how I was acting because I was trying to get friends. But there's also a difference between like, is getting out of your
It was
comfort
still
zone-
in character for you though.
Yeah, is getting out of your comfort zone but still being in character not authentic. It's odd, right? It really cropped up for me and became a priority when I started dating in like later elementary school and high school. Because in my early relationships, I was cheated on a lot, which made me really wary of like fake people. Or now I can deem it as inauthentic people.
Right.
Um, because I had just so much mistrust for people at that point that it was almost like a guarantee that, okay, I'm not going to date someone if I can't deem them to be authentic. But authenticity, I have written here, is it's almost like a gateway drug to trust because when a person acts consistently, they become more predictable and thus easier to trust. Even when they're authentically an asshole, you can still trust that you know their character.
Yeah.
So whether you're accurately a good person or accurately a bad person, I still know you, as opposed to I don't know how you're really feeling here. I know you're acting one way, but you're saying shit that doesn't quite line up, and I have
Mm,
no idea what you're thinking. So you're kind of shifty, you know?
yeah.
So I think sometimes I was authentically a dick, and I think other times I was authentically a good person. On the younger side, usually more of a dick, and on the older side, usually more honest. But I can't think of many times I acted in contrast to how it felt. Then
I
you
used to
just
do
got
that all the time.
just to
Um,
get people to like you.
not even not even necessarily that. I think that was less frequent than when I did it with family,
Mm.
like with parents and stuff like that. You
Like
know,
with family.
well, my parents were separated, and so there was like certain things that like I couldn't tell about one to the other, or like one didn't want to know to the other, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and so when I would get asked about that, I had to be constantly conscientious of like what I could say and what I couldn't say, and then frame it in such a way that didn't sound suspicious.
That's fair.
And so like that is a trap that I still actively fight because it's like instinctually for me at this point, it is so easy to just like come up with something on the fly and lie and not even like think about like what the words I'm actually saying.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've like consciously thought, Christ. Um,
What's an
but
example? What's an easy example when like you could lie?
so if my mom bought me a new bicycle
Hmm.
and my dad had, gotten me into vintage bicycles.
Hmm.
My mom wouldn't want me to tell my dad that she also got me a bicycle because then my dad would be upset that my mom is trying to take over a hobby that he initiated with me
Right.
and trying to, essentially like bring more value to her side of the parental relationship by, throwing, you know, opportunity at me in another avenue that I didn't have with my dad. And so
Right.
I wasn't supposed to tell my dad about said bicycle. And if
Mhm.
my dad found out about said bicycle, it would be a bad day. Right.
Right.
And so, when I would go over to my dad's house when I was working on bicycles, I had to make sure that I kept that aspect in mind.
Right.
Then there were times where he'd ask like, "Oh, like, do you have this X bike?" Or like, "I know you saw this on Craigslist the other week. Did you end up buying it?" And it's like, the truth may have been yes, but I had to say no,
Right.
right? And so like situations like that, after probably 8 years of doing that, or more, honestly, it
Right.
sets in like very concretely into like your style of thinking. That's something I wish I had not adopted.
So what's a modern example of it? Because you don't really have to lie between your parents anymore a whole lot, right? Like they don't do
Yeah, I usually do like white lies. Like I'll just omit things.
like I went to Subway instead of McDonald's or
No, like my mom doesn't know that I have the Porsche,
oh
which
gotcha.
is really odd actually because for a very long time she was a big proponent of me getting that car
Yeah.
and she talked to my dad a lot about me getting that car.
Hmm.
But it was very awkward because the day that I graduated Florida Tech, she said, "Just make sure you don't get that Porsche. It's a money pit." I was like, "What?"
She's totally right.
I mean, she is right. She's often right. Um,
But then
But it was confusing to me because she spent so many years talking about it like this would be a good
right.
thing for me and a
Right.
good thing for my racing. And so, like, obviously, I was still set on getting it and I got it, but I just like neglected to ever tell her that I got it
Right.
because I didn't know how she would react. Or another example is I grew up with cats my whole life. My dad had a cat, my mom had a cat, my mom still has a cat.
Right.
Um, and so, when I got to college, I got cats and, I have cats now, but my mom doesn't know I have cats now because every single time she's found out that I have cats, I get, an earful because it's a terrible decision and it's stupid and you can't go anywhere without worrying about them and blah, blah, blah. Although, like, she's dealt with that her entire life and I've dealt with it my entire life and I haven't run into an issue that I can't solve yet. So,
Right.
it's like stuff like that. Like, I'll just omit that I have cats,
Got it.
you know?
And it's because you don't want to hear a bunch of shit.
Right. Like, I have enough stuff being thrown at me on a daily basis or enough stuff to think about that I don't need. Like, I can improve myself without worrying about dealing with the judgment from other people that I shouldn't have to worry about judgment from, you know?
Gotcha. It's
Like, I feel like I have enough going on right now. It's like I have enough on my plate to deal with and to, like, self-improve, and I think I've made a good amount of progress in my life overall as, like, a person,
Mhm.
right? I don't want like, I can only stack my plate so full at once,
Right.
before it just becomes unreasonable to try and tackle all these things to a proficient extent at the same time,
Right.
right? You could half-ass everything, but then it's not worth really doing anything at all.
Yeah.
Um,
I do the
so
opposite, and I get that shit from my mom. Like, every conversation, there's, like, some type of, like, hidden something.
I think it's different though because for a long, long time, like, I never had that interaction with my mom at all. But
Right.
it's like for me to, like, completely flip the switch in my 20s,
Yeah.
my mom's like, "What the fuck?" You know what I mean? Right? But it's like if I had started out being more authentic and honest in my teens, it would probably be a lot at least simpler in terms of a consistency standpoint
Yeah.
to deal with it today. It might not be easier. I mean, I will probably still get an earful and it would still suck, but at least it would be consistent in nature. And so that's like, there's just like an added layer of twists there that I haven't quite tackled yet.
Yeah. I get kind of I started being blunt in my teens, like, early on, and my mom thought it was like, "Oh, you're, like, a teenager and you think you're always right." And then as I got older, she was like, "Oh, no, like, this is just the way that you are. I don't understand why you're acting this way." So, like, right now, she and my dad are having problems, with money stuff because my mom is embezzling money and my dad is, like, you know, catching her and she won't admit to it. And so she like, a couple weeks ago, she texted me and she was like, um she asked me some leading question that was like, "Oh, like, would you like me to give you some of our Christmas decorations this year?" And I was like, "Sure." And then she was like, "Did you know that dad has access to your bank account?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's the one who set it up for me in high school." And she was like, "Right, but he still has access to it." And I was like, "Mhm." And she was like, "And you're okay with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, as long as he doesn't take money from me. He's welcome to give me money, that's fine, but I know he's not gonna. Like, he's like, as long as he doesn't take shit from me, I don't
Right.
care." And she was like, "It doesn't bother you that he can see your transaction history?" And I was like, "No, why would it bother me?" And she was like, "Well, because of judgment." And I was like, "I don't give a fuck about judgment. Judgment only matters if I give a shit what you have to say, and I don't give a fuck what he has to say about my money. It's my
Yeah.
fucking money. He's welcome to try to give me advice. I won't take it. It's my fucking money."
Right.
Um, and I was like, "I think you're projecting because you don't want him to see your expenses because you know that there's something shady about your expenses, but there's nothing shady about what I spend my money on." And she didn't like the light being turned around on her like that, so she got pissy. But most of the time when I'm authentic with my mom, it ends up being some type of conversation like that where she gets frustrated and doesn't understand, and then I get an earful because she doesn't think that it's the right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an odd balance. I don't really know. I think the best, utopian solution would be I could just tell the truth fully about everything and she would be understanding and accepting.
Yeah,
But, people in hell want ice water too. So it's like I am I try to put the things on the front burners that I need to,
yeah.
and then the other stuff goes to the back burner.
Mm.
Um, and it sucks because I feel like I say no to a lot of stuff. Like I say no to dealing with the parental, oddities that I have back home. I say no to fixing up the Porsche. I say no to, fixing the interior in the BMW because I don't really care. I say no to um, other opportunities here and there, or like, hangouts that people present to me and stuff like that. But I also feel like I already have so much going on that I need to say more. I need to say no to more.
Mhm.
And so that's something that I've been battling, not battling, but like thinking about consciously.
Mm.
Is like trying to like really narrow down my focus and really like hone in. Um, it's actually been nice, since I quit Kratom, my sleep schedule's been a little bit better. And so I've actually been able to be overall more productive during the day. The past couple of days have kind of been an exception because of this truck issue. But if I look at the truck issue and I think, okay, how much work did I get done overall, and when did I wake up, and how much did I do
Right.
overall in total, I probably accomplished more than I would have on average a month prior.
Because you're sleeping 6 hours less a night.
Well, well, yeah, but well, not really. I mean, I am sleeping less, but I feel more rested
Mm,
and I get up on time better.
yeah.
And I don't feel as dependent on tea in order to get me through the day. So I think I'm naturally starting to recover to a state where I just feel relatively energized.
Gotcha.
And so that overall has been helping me. And I think there's probably a mental component of it. Like I kicked kratom and I'm kicking nicotine. Like I can do these things that I thought were going to be really, really fucking hard.
Right.
So it's like I can do this other stuff that I think is going to be really hard. So I think there's like just a mental component to it too.
Gotcha.
But it's a tricky environment to navigate, and authenticity kind of lives more or less at the center of it. It's like who am I authentically, and how am I portraying myself, and kind of not mulling for days over that self-reflection about one issue, but trying to take note of if my actions align with my thoughts and my words. I think is important. And that's kind of like a process that I'm going through now and have been going through and have gotten better, but there's always room for improvement.
Real shit, bro. Are you ready for our first segment?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Okay. Segment 1 is defining what is authenticity. I have written here that authenticity, as Alex Hormozy defines it, is the state of being in which what you think, what you say, and what you do are in alignment. Consistency in these 3 things indicate that you have no hidden motives and act with integrity. And then personally, I have written authenticity is a measure of how accurately a person represents themselves through their conduct. A person who conducts themselves in contrast to how they feel or who they are inside truly is not an accurate representation of themselves and thus cast doubt on the character of themselves in the eyes of those around them.
Real shit, bro.
Real shit, bro.
I agree with that definition overall. It goes along with that definition encompasses all of the bullet points that I've written
Okay,
to some extent.
cool. So we can just skip that
Um,
then.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You kidding? No, at a good bullet points, we must explore. So also consistency between what you think, say, and do. I think authenticity is also a self reflection of who you are inside. Right? It is like your truth.
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally, yeah, like that is your goal.
Mhm.
And then like you said, it's a how consistent are you with that true self, and like how much of your outside expression is reflective of your inner self.
I just
Right?
made a connection.
Yeah.
I think the reason that I hate political correctness is because political correctness is someone telling you to put a filter on. And if you're putting a filter on, then you're basically asking me to not be authentic.
Yeah.
If you don't like me for saying the word retarded, then don't hang out with me.
I
Don't
like
make me change myself.
I took a small trip to Blue Lagoon today just to like chill a little bit
Mhm.
midday. And
How dare you?
I know. And I
You said it like it was a bad thing. Like you were in trouble.
yeah, yeah.
Like you're disappointed. It's no big deal.
Um I went to Blue Lagoon and ordered a kava shot,
Yeah.
and she was like, "Oh, do you want like our newer style or the old OG one?"
Yeah.
And I'd had the newer style last week, and it was like this weird, like it was like really weak. Um, and I like without even thinking about it, I was like, "I want the old one. The new one's dog shit."
Yeah.
And she was like, "I agree." And I was like, "Sorry to be blunt." Like I didn't even realize it, but I was like, "Sorry, I'm just like I'm blunt." But she was like, "No, I'm the same way." I was like, "Okay, cool." But it's like the the more I go on in, you know, this self-growth phase and, trying to learn about who I want to become and also trying to become a better person, the more I lean towards just kind of just being who I am. And then if people have a problem with that, that's on them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think I lean that way I probably feel as though I lean that way 85 to 90%. Realistically, I probably lean that way more like 60 to 70%.
Okay.
Just because I think there are probably still things that I don't realize that I do that do not reflect my authentic self, even though I'm trying to be conscientious of it. There's still probably some portion, some percentage that I just don't realize.
Can you think of any?
I can't think of any specific because then I would be able to say, okay, I can improve that, right? But I could say that there's it's likely that when I have there are some percentage of conversations I have with strangers where I automatically filter my response to make the conversation easier,
Yeah.
right? There, it would be hard for me to think of an example of what I do currently because if as soon as I think of it, I try to improve it,
Right.
right? But I would assume that most of my problems have stemmed from interactions with people I don't know about or don't know how they would react. And so, given that information, I would say there's probably still some portion or some types of conversations where I unknowingly filter or pull myself back
Right.
in order to alleviate, unknown stresses. That's what I would say.
Okay.
What about you? Do you think that you go into any type of conversation where you specifically filter, or maybe cater a little bit, or kind of maybe tangent to what your true self is? Act in tangent to your true self.
I don't think these days I ever act non-authentically. So a great example was I was supposed to meet with my program's chief engineer and our customer counterpart chief engineer um, to sign off on this project that I've been working on. It's kind of a big deal. Um, but yesterday we had our weekly team meeting and I told the team, I was like, I have this meeting with these guys tomorrow. And one of the guys jokingly was like, "Oh, like you better dress up for it." And I was like, "No, I don't think I will. I'm just going to dress comfortably." And he was like, "Dude, these are important people." And I was like, "I don't care. I'm just going to dress comfortably." And my boss pulled me aside afterwards and he was like, "Hey dude, I get it, but these are important people. I don't care what you wear, but you can't wear the duct tape shoe." And I was like, "Okay." So for the anyone who doesn't know, my work shoes, I've only owned one pair of work shoes ever in my time working at a 9 to 5, and they will be the only 9 to 5 work shoes that I own. And as a result of that, the sole is completely worn through. You can see my socks through the shoe. The sole is falling off, and I use packaging tape to hold it together. And everybody knows my duct tape shoes. And so I was like, I told my boss, I was like, "Are you going to this meeting?" Because he didn't go to the last one. He was like, "Yes." And our customer is there, so it's important that we, like, represent. And I was like, "Okay, for you, so that I can save your reputation, because you seem to care about this job, I'll wear my nicer shoes." They're not my nicest shoes, but they're nicer shoes. These are the shoes right here, so no duct tape.
Ooh,
And he was like, "Thank you." And, today I was at the meeting wound up getting postponed, and instead I got the meeting, replaced with another meeting full of guys that I usually work with, and everybody commented on the shoes. Everyone was like, "Oh my god, dude, where are your duct tape shoes?" And there was one guy who doesn't know me, and so they were all telling him about my shoes, and, like, everyone's talking about this, and the guy who was new to this idea, he was like, "Are you, like, just trying to get, like, some sympathy from your man? Like, are you trying to get a promotion or something? Like, are you trying to get attention from it?" And I was like, No, not really." And he was like, "Oh, but, like, it kinda seems like a pity play, right?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I don't know how you perceive it. I perceive it a different way.
right.
Um, you could promote me to, like, a level 8 engineer right now, and I would still wear those shoes." And he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "If they told you that they would promote you if you stopped wearing the shoes, would you take it?" And I was like, "No." So in some aspects, I'm fully authentic and I don't care. I've been working recently on not letting my authenticity come across as rude, because sometimes I recognize that I think differently than people and I act differently than people, like with my shoes, but I don't have to be an ass about it. So, like, he could have been like, "Oh, don't wear your duct tape shoes." And I could have been like, "Fuck yourself. I'll wear what I want." And that, like, is authentically how I felt, but I just wasn't rude about it. So I think that,
That's a question that I have too, though, and that's something that I feel like I'm struggling with right now. Is I don't understand where to draw the line between politeness and authenticity. Because sometimes I just want to tell someone to go fuck themselves, but like I
yeah,
know I shouldn't say that.
well,
But that's honestly what I feel like saying.
but I think that mood is different from character. 'Cause like, for example, today I was at the bar between work and coming here, and I really didn't wanna talk to people because people have been bothering me all day. There's loud music at the bar, there's shift change, so people are trying to get my attention.
Mhm.
I don't wanna talk to people. And so, I told Grace, who was also trying to talk to me, I was like, listen, I need 20 minutes with my earbuds in, just not talking to people. And she was like, okay, got it. And so Alinka came by to like ask me for a bull call or something. And I just gave her the thumbs up and kept working. And I think now I saw Grace then like catch her arm and like pull her back and tell her something. And I've since pieced it together that she was asking if I wanted a Lolo for the bull call. And I gave her the thumbs up because normally she just asks.
I do that all the time because of the noise canceling.
Yeah.
I won't even understand what she's saying. I'll just be like, yep. And then I'll get a fucking drink. I'm like,
So I'm used to her asking, are you all good? Do you need anything? So I give her a thumbs up and it's good. She was asking for if I wanted a Lolo and I was telling her to,
would you like $100 bar tab?
yeah, exactly. And so Grace was pulling her aside to say, no, he just doesn't want to be bothered right now. Don't get him a Lolo, right?
Yeah.
But I made the conscious choice of don't speak to Alenka and risk being an ass because I'm in a shitty mood, because Alenka's in a good mood today and my shitty mood doesn't have to bring her down. So just don't be mean, right? It is a whole other podcast episode trying to keep emotions in check. But what I'm trying to do is to be myself, but not be rude, because I don't want to be a rude person. I want to be an honest person. So if Alenka came up to me and asked me if I wanted a bula, I would say, no, thank you. I just need some time to work right now. And she would have gotten the message or something like that. Or like I was to Grace, I was like, hey, I just need to not talk to people for 20 minutes. Right. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a interesting thought. There's definitely a tipping point where you can try to be so polite that you become inauthentic.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can in your moment you could have, taken out your headphones and had a conversation and asked about her day and blah blah blah, right? But and that would have been a polite response.
Yeah.
Would have been, but it almost would have bordered on inauthentic because in that moment you were trying to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that's it's been an interesting dilemma for me. It's like, where do I draw the line between um needing to prioritize the things that are in front of me that I need to do, whilst also not completely shutting down the people around me.
I think the key is to deliver the message in a polite way. So if the message is, I don't want to be bothered, you say to someone like, oh, no bullet call for me. Thank you. I just need some time to work on my own. And then you're polite about it, because the messaging is the same, but the delivery is different, and we can choose the delivery. I used to be in high school, especially, I used a lot of swear words, and I would be more crude with it because I thought it was funny, and it was funny. But as I've grown older, my sense of humor has changed a bit. And now when I'm in happy, jovial conversations, I can say mean shit and have it be funny. But
Jovial,
jovial is like fun, like joking,
okay.
like a joke. But if I'm like actually in an upset mood, I shouldn't make upset jokes, because then it comes off as me just being me. So like if I'm hanging out with Greg and we're all doing Lolos and we're like fucking around, and Joel is like, oh, do you guys want another one? I could be like, Joel, fuck off, because I've just done 3, right? And he'll take that as a joke. But if I'm silently working with my earbuds in and Joel comes by and is like, do you want to do a Lolo with me? And I'm like, Joel, fuck off. That has a different inclinations. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I've really put forth a lot of effort in the last year or so to do this, because a lot of people would call me a dick in high school, and I would like gladly wear the term because I thought that meant I was funny. But to some people I was funny, but to some people I was just actually a dick. And I don't want to be that person.
I was like the complete polar opposite. I was like always like the really nice guy.
Yeah.
Like everyone had a very easy time getting along with me by and large.
I did.
What?
I did.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
became friends.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's part of what caused the bullying I bumped into too. Was like I was just like a really easy pick. I think a lot of those kids probably just had like disturbed home lives
Yeah.
and like, came to school and could kind of get away with what they wanted to. And so I was kind of easy picking for that. But there was like, I remember we used to have like pen pals and buddies and stuff like that. Like, I was a 5th grader and I was partnering up with a 2nd grader to teach them about, I don't know, water,
Right.
whatever.
Water.
We did like one that was like butterflies, and then one that was like water cycle, and like
Water cycle. Got it. They like bottled water. And I was like, what the fuck? Okay, got it. I think I was a part of a similar thing.
right, yeah. And I would very consistently get the kid who is like troubled and a little bit more challenging to interact with, like very consistent.
A younger kid than you.
Yeah. Like if I was always partnered up with the kid that was like a little bit emotionally rambunctious, a little bit tough to get along with. And I think that was because like most of the teachers saw someone that could manipulate themselves to the situation easily and kind of just like get along with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's a balance in there because you can't. I'm happy that I'm getting to the point where I can choose how I want to react because I think that is the most valuable.
Yeah.
But if I were to choose being only one, either super nice guy or like super blunt guy,
Mm-hmm.
I think I would probably choose super blunt guy.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a gift to be able to balance the two, but it's definitely been a work in progress to work back from. Yeah.
So I think that bluntness is different from
Rude.
yeah. We
Yeah.
had a podcast on this, which was man, the thumbnail was like being blunt isn't bad. It's like the difference between being blatant and being
Oh, blatant honesty. It was oh god, what's the name of that podcast? That was a while back.
I
It
don't-
was like 20 weeks ago.
yeah. Wasn't that long, was it? We were in this room for it, I think. Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, I forget what it was. I'm glad we dedicated so much time to that episode. Just forget it. But essentially, what I'm saying is, I think you can be blunt and be an ass, or you can be blunt and be polite. And most people who are blunt are an ass about it. So a lot of people who are used to being polite, when they interact with bluntness, it's not genuinely kind bluntness, it's mean bluntness. So when I say I aspire to be like Alex Hormozy, who is unapologetically blunt, he isn't an asshole. He's nice. He's a kind person, and he's open about what his values are, and he's not mean. And then you can contrast that with somebody who is unapologetically themselves in such a way that makes them kind of an ass. Like, I would say that Ben Shapiro is a better example of someone who's blunt and also kind of a dick sometimes. Like, he very clearly shows his colors, but also sprinkles insults in there. And Alex Ramosi is someone who very clearly shows his colors and is like a gentle giant. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just like I don't have a clear picture of where to draw the line. Like with a gentle giant, like
Mhm.
where do you draw the line for gentle? Right? It's like how do you know? Like is it just based off experience? Is it just based off feel? And then if it is like, my analytical brain is like, how do I make this not subjective?
How do I optimize?
And then my emotional
Gentle.
side of the brain is like, you're already doing better. Just fucking go for it. Right? And so it's like I don't really know how to balance the two effectively without just kind of feeling it out and learning as I go.
I think that
Learning.
Right,
I mean, I
right.
guess just based on like my experiences and interactions.
So interesting concept here. I went back and rewatched our very first Vision 79 episode today because
A whole 27 minutes worth?
no,
Vision
it's
7
two parts and it's 55 minutes. And
Oh, is it? Okay.
yeah, and it's titled Authenticity something 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 else. And I was like, "Oh, we covered authenticity already in our very first episode. I wonder how it
interesting.
compares to now." Because we were brand new to Hormozy at the time and didn't have our current definition. And we defined authenticity as being if the way that you act is the same as the way you feel, then you're authentic. Which is pretty close to what we have now. If you count feeling as thinking and saying and then action as action, then it's but it's interesting because that's an early unrefined version of what we now have, which is
Fair.
operationalized. And right now we're in the early kind of feel stage of how do you define gentleness? And in 20 episodes, we can have one on how to be gentle, right? That is more operationalized. But I would say from my current stance, so that I can go back and rewatch this in 20 episodes, being gentle is being firm in your beliefs with people while expressing gratitude toward them, regardless of what position you're actually in. So if they're helping you, you're grateful for them helping you. And if you're dismissing them, you're grateful that they're giving you the space that you're requesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of how I take it.
I hear that.
So if I don't want to be bothered, it's like, even if I'm frustrated, I could be like, "Hey, fuck off, don't bother me right now." And that's the same message as, "I appreciate you checking in on me. I just need 20 minutes to work on my own right now."
Right.
And in one of them, it's like, I'm dismissive and I'm not grateful because you're bothering me. And in the other one, I'm grateful that you're checking in on me and I'm grateful that you're about to give me the time that I'm about to ask for. That's kind of how I take it. But
I have one here that I think kind of dives down in a little bit of a different direction than the think, say, do.
okay.
And it's um you're authentic if you manage to create a lack of self-deception. Essentially, the less falsehoods you're able to convince yourself of, the more authentic you are.
Hmm.
But I think it's kind of interesting because you could convince yourself of a falsehood and still think, say, and do in alignment, just all based on one thing that is false, but you believe as true through self-deception of the fact. For example, if you think that you're doing an excellent job at work,
Hmm.
you know, but your productivity metrics are well below everyone else's,
Right.
right? But you think you're doing great, right? You self deceive yourself into that was a fucking mouthful, into thinking that you are good to go and you're on the right path and you're doing awesome.
Right.
And so you tell other people that, you tell your family, you tell your friends that, and you continue to work what you think is hard. But is that process, because it's stacked on top of self-deception, is that process still authentic? Is that like your authentic self, right? Or does authenticity also have a pairing to the internal truth of the matter?
To reality, right?
Right.
Because then it's
Yeah.
the theory of relativity. Because I could think I'm a hard worker, I can tell people I'm a hard worker, and then I can work hard. But if I don't work as hard as Alex Hormozy, am I a hard worker?
Yeah.
It's like, does your action actually align with reality's definition of it?
Right.
Because a great example right now is my mom. She has some type of like dysphoria with reality. So a real world scenario is I'll say, did you tell your therapist and my dad that you've been funneling this money? And then my mom would go, no, I haven't been doing it. And I would go, okay, hang on. You know, you you say that you aren't doing it. She's like, yes. And I go, but you did it. And she goes, I did it because of XYZ reason. And I was like, okay, but you did it. And she would go, because of XYZ reason. And I would go, okay, so you can understand that since you did it, it's a false statement to say that you didn't do it. And she would go, no, it doesn't count. It doesn't count because I did it for XYZ reason. And she can't
Yeah.
understand that regardless of intent, an action is an action. So she has some type of dysphoria with reality where she's not grounded in the world that we actually live in. So she's authentic. She's just authentically delusional. In like
That's
the
interesting.
Yeah, in the most difficult way to comprehend. Because I have written here, authenticity doesn't come naturally to everyone. I've met people who are naturally predisposed to lying, otherwise known as acting inauthentically.
That was me, man. That was when I was younger,
Sure. Yeah.
all the family stuff. I'm
Sure.
100%.
Yeah. A great example.
Yeah.
And my mom acts what I would say is authentically, because she has lied to herself so much that she genuinely thinks the lie is real. She acts in accordance to it and she speaks in accordance to it. It's just on a false pretense.
Yeah.
But then you get into the point of, okay, well, like, fucking, you can't say that, every religion isn't true. So, the wrong religion, you're not authentic because you're wrong about that. Like, we could be wrong about the Einstein's theory of relativity, right?
Sure.
Like the heliocentric model of the universe might be wrong and we're not living authentically because that's not true. But you can only live as authentically as your truth is. And I think that your pursuit of finding out how rooted in reality you actually are is separate from your authenticity.
Is the combination of authenticity and truth wisdom? Potentially.
I don't know.
Some component?
Do you have to be wise to be authentic? Or do you have to
I
be
think I
authentic
did,
to be
yeah.
wise?
I th That's a tough one.
I think to be a model, like a role model, you have to be authentic.
I think, yes. So I think if you are someone who is wise and other people count on,
Mm-hmm.
you have an obligation to be authentic.
Right.
If you are isolated in your own little bubble and you never interact with someone, you could be as,
Right.
you could be as authentic
Well,
as you want and it wouldn't matter.
something that I'm considering is corrupt politicians are not authentic because they think one way and then they act another. Right.
Yeah.
And they could be good at politics. They could be wise and then use their powers for evil. And so they're not authentic, but they are wise.
Is that wise though, or is it that just smart?
What's wisdom?
Yeah, I don't know. That was a good another good podcast episode.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
it
that
just popped in my mind. I thought,
it's interesting because authenticity can go like generally when you think of authenticity, you think of good people. Like an authentic person is someone who you can trust.
yeah,
But I think that authenticity just means you can trust that you can reliably anticipate a person's next move. So someone can be authentically a bad person. Like they can feel evil and speak and act evil.
Mm.
Like if you're like a biker gang guy or Dr. Mendeleev, the evil doctor who like separated conjoined twins in the Holocaust and like hurt
oh yeah,
people and like took pleasure from it, right? An evil person who knew he was evil spoke and acted as evil, right? And then on the flip side, you have, truly honorably good people who think, speak, and act, with the intent of helping others, right?
mm,
Um, and I would almost rather interact with an authentic person, good or evil, than an inauthentic person who I don't know where your true motives lie.
yeah.
Because
Oh,
usually your true motives lie in if you aren't authentic, I would say it's more fair to say that you are acting on the evil side than the good side.
right. Well, if you're inauthentic, I think more times than not, you are hiding something that you think other people would judge,
Right.
right? And inherently, I think people are predisposed to think that people judge them for bad things more than they judge them for good things.
Right.
And so, if you are going to act inauthentically, you are likely acting in a way to hide something bad or that you think people will think is bad that
Right.
you are doing.
Right. And
So,
to strawman that or devil's advocate that, we spoke in the last episode about my performance reviews because for the past year, I haven't written performance reviews about myself because I didn't want to be judged for the work I was doing because I didn't want to take credit for work that was done as a team. And so I didn't want to be judged on something that actually would have been looked upon favorably. So you could hide something that, like my mom hiding the money funneling thing because she doesn't want to be judged for something that would be deemed as bad, or you could hide your performance because you don't want to be deemed for something that's good.
but I think in your situation, your conscious thought to not take credit for work that other people participated in comes from an authentic place. In the sense that, like, these are your morals and values, and this is
Right.
how I want my thinking, my saying, and my doing to be aligned. So therefore, I'm not going to fill out this performance report,
Right.
right? Versus someone who's inauthentic does not have that chain
Right.
there, right? So although I like the steelman argument, I think there definitely is another side to that coin.
Mm.
I would still argue that more times than not, someone who's inauthentic is hiding something that is seen
Yep.
as a majority negative.
Yep. I agree. Okay. So are you ready to move on to section 2?
Let's go for it.
Section 2 is talking about why authenticity is important to us. And I have here authenticity is critical to your social standing. Trust is built off of an ability to predict someone's actions based on known motives. If their actions conflict with their motives, they automatically come across as untrustworthy. This is important for building romantic relationships, friendships, and business partnerships. Do you think authenticity is important?
Absolutely.
Why?
I have a bunch of stuff written down here. Starting from the top of the list, I think I have written down mental sanity and belief. If you lie to yourself, how can you trust yourself, right? So there is a component to authenticity of like other people should and need to be able to understand who you really are.
Mhm.
And the vehicle to understanding who you really are is you being authentic,
Yeah.
right? That's the vehicle that other people take in order to understand you. But additionally, you need to be authentic, self-reflect to yourself, right? So it's like if you tell yourself, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z today, then you should follow through and do X, Y, and Z. Because as soon as you think and don't do, you break the chain of like a self accountability and
Right.
self authenticity.
You can't trust yourself to do what you set out.
Right. And if there's one person in the world that you need to be able to trust, it's yourself.
Right.
Right. That's the first thing I have written down. I think that being authentic in that also reduces internal conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, if there's less potential for being at battle with yourself if you always act or attempt to act in a way that you believe is yourself, right? Because then you kind of eliminate the stage for having one version of you battle another version of you inside of you, like the lying self battling the one that wants to tell the truth,
Right.
right? So you eliminate that uh, that battle. I think that being authentic lowers anxiety and depression overall.
Mm.
I think that it can create for stressful situations, but I think you can come out of those situations feeling better. Overall, in
What
the end.
kind of stressful situations?
Like if I were to call my mom up today and be like, "Hey, I have cats and I have the Porsche,"
Right.
like that'd be a stressful 30-minute phone call, but it could result in something better long term.
Why is it stressful?
Um, because I don't like getting yelled at.
Why?
Um, it just kind of hurts because I I have a lot of respect for my parents,
Mm.
although they I think it's hard to be a perfect parent. I don't think anyone's a perfect parent. But looking back on it, despite, several times that it was very challenging for me, um, I did have a very positive life overall. And I did have family that cared about me a lot and still does care about me a lot. And I think that has a lot of value. And, it's almost like I'd rather them live in the in the bliss of the ignorance than to really know the truth. Until I can, like, firmly say, "Hey, like, I'm financially independent completely, like, I in addition to me never needing help from you guys ever again,
Mm.
like, you will no longer have to work either."
Right.
Like, at that point, I feel comfortable being like, "Yeah, I have cats," as stupid as that sounds, right? Um,
Do you feel like the BMW and cats cost money, and so they would feel like, "Oh, like, if we ever help you out, you're just gonna blow it on shit that we don't approve of?" So you don't wanna tell them because you don't want them to feel that you're wasting their money, even though it's not a waste to you.
I think there is probably a some component of that, even on stuff that I have bought for myself with my own money, my mom has always seen it as, like, family money because if I run into financial hardship, that is, like, I will lean on family.
Right.
Um, I think there is a component of that, which is probably why I feel as though once I make it financially successfully and, I'm, doing really well, there won't be that component anymore and I'll feel more free.
Right.
I think overall, I'm not willing to take the leap to really dive into every single aspect of, the little nuances of my life because I have so much other stuff I'm trying to better about myself. I feel like I can hit the big 10% marks
Mhm.
and worry about like the 2% marks later.
Got it.
Right. But I think overall, by and large, as kind of like broad strokes, uh, being authentic long term will lower anxiety and depression.
Mhm.
Um, I think it leads to stronger bonds long term. I think if you can be authentic, you eliminate the potential to mix up your lies in the future,
Yeah.
right? And then on top of that, too, um, consistency, like you talked about, being really consistent in your actions and consistent in your words helps people understand who you really are, and that builds for good, strong relationships,
Yeah.
long term relationships for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I think also there's a certain like aura that people give off when they're being authentic. It's like a certain
It's like confidence.
it's like confidence but vulnerability at the same time.
Openness.
Yeah, openness.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I'm confident in what I'm saying because I know it is factually true, but I'm also aware of the fact that I am opening up about something that you may not anticipated hearing.
Yeah,
All right.
it's like you can ask me anything and I'll answer it honestly, and I'm not really worried about what you have to say about it because I'm confident in myself to handle it.
Right, right. Um, and I think that process opens the door for common ground
Yeah.
between two people. It opens the door for conflict resolution without just getting upset at each other and yelling at one another, right?
Yeah.
I think as soon as you start to like back out or like shield your opinion, you give off the vibe that you're on guard.
Yeah.
So they immediately either choose to also be on guard or attack your guard. If you open up with, I'm not on guard, this is just how I feel, I think they're less likely to attack because it would almost like if they attacked you after that point, it would seem as like unarmed slaughter against you, right?
Right.
In like a more vulgar sense.
Then it's
You
like
know?
righteousness. Right.
Yeah. It would be like, when you approach someone with honesty, openness, and authenticity, it's like you're completely unarmed, open-handed.
Right.
It's like for them to like chop your head off with a sword with their insult would just be like other people would look at them worse for doing that
Right.
than to just have an open conversation. So,
Yeah.
but if I were to come up with a sword and shield drawn and been like, this is my opinion, verbally and how I'm expressing myself in a figurative manner like that, then they're going to do the same thing back at me because they feel threatened too.
Right.
Right. Um, but those are some of the things. I have a few others, but I like to
Mhm.
hear what you got to.
I think authenticity is important to me, like I said earlier, because it came from a history of cheating.
Hmm.
Because the first girlfriend that I had, um, she didn't cheat on me, but she and I stopped dating, and then she immediately dated like another like one of my friends, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So you just wanted to like climb the social standing because that guy was cooler than me, and I was like, okay. And so then I fell in love with her best friend, and that happened naturally. I actually liked her first, but I was too afraid to ask her out because she was way prettier. Um, but that was the first person who I loved, and so we dated for a while, and she wound up cheating on me, um, and didn't tell me about it for like a week. And so it was like, okay, so you lied to me for a week and then told me that you did this thing. That really hurt. And I dealt with that several more times, and so it became increasingly more difficult for me to trust people because you can never tell what someone's thinking. Their actions speak for themselves. So the only way to know what someone's really truly thinking is to find an area of their life where they act authentically to the way that they think. And that's tough to do. The easiest way to find it is through like their close friends. Like, what do they tell their close friends? Right. Because if they are telling their close friends something that is in alignment to the way that they think, um, then their actions ultimately will speak to that as well. So, if they're using you, then they'll tell their best friends, I'm using this guy. I'm going to, use him to get to the next one or whatever. Right.
Mm.
And so it became important to me really quickly. And by really quickly, I guess I mean through like 6 relationships, which isn't quick at all. That authenticity is important. It took me a long time to determine how to identify authenticity. Um, and once I figured it out, I had my first like solid like over a year relationship, and that ended up being like a 7-year relationship.
How did you identify it?
It wasn't jumping in too quickly. It was talking to a lot of their friends and getting their opinions on them, like their genuine raw opinions, and having deep conversations early on. A lot of the earlier relationships I had were like, "Oh, you're cute and
Mm.
we should date." It was superficial. And this relationship was more along the lines of, "Are you capable of can you spell sentences correctly?" was a big one. Not kidding. Do you use Snapchat or will you text on iMessages? Will you have long phone calls with me? What are your values? What are your goals? Um, just largely like, do you align with the way that I'm thinking? And then most importantly, I had spent some time with them before dating to gauge how they conducted themselves in a public setting. Um, and through all of those things, you can generally tell, okay, if they're telling me this and then they're telling their friend the same thing, because I'm friends with her friend or I have a mutual friend or something, and I can validate that story, then what they're telling me is the same as what they're thinking and the same as what they're telling their friends. Thus, they become more predictable. Um, and so I just became more selective with the people in my life, um, and found more authentic people as a result of it, which I think is on the whole a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, so I had talked to a ton of people before I met Grace, and Grace was up to that point the most authentic person that I had found, and I was like, "Okay, this is a good person to keep." But it took me like 4 months of like going out on dates and dating before I would put a stamp on it and say, "Okay, we're actually dating." And it's because I wanted to be super, super certain. Because every time you go through a breakup, you lose a piece of yourself that you don't get back.
Mm.
And I was like, "I don't know how many more of these pieces I have, so I need to not waste my time with this." Um, but authenticity is important to me because I need to know who I can rely on and who I can't. The beauty in authenticity is that authentic people who are clearly trustworthy, they either are trustworthy or they aren't. If they think, speak, and act like an asshole, such as bragging about taking advantage of people, they're being authentic and they're authentically representing themselves as a shitty person. This reliably tells me not to trust them. People who are not authentic are harder to read and thus more challenging to determine whether or not to trust them. Do you have any specifically inauthentic people you can think of off the top of your head? We can name drop people in our lives today, or we could, oh shit, I'm pouring drinks everywhere.
Oh boy.
Or we can talk about people from our past. We can leave names out of it.
Oh man, I think there's probably a lot of kids I grew up who were inauthentic, and I think that was just a factor of, kids trying to fit into social circles.
Name drop them.
Oh man.
You know what's interesting? I thought about
Honestly, I can't even remember some of their last names, to be honest. I just know their faces.
it's so I was thinking about this the other day because so many people are on podcasts. They're like, oh, can I say this here? Or can I say that there? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to say their name. And it's like, unless we've signed a fucking NDA together, if you did something, I'm going to say it how you said it.
Right.
Like I don't care. I don't fucking care. Unless you directly ask me not to say something about it, you have to direct me ask.
Yeah, no. I mean,
Not even that I won't fucking respect it sometimes. If you directly ask me not to do something and then you fuck me over, you can fuck yourself. I'll just say what you want. Thanks. And that's on being a little rude and authentic.
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open. I don't think there's much of anything that someone could ask me that I wouldn't be open to answering. Um, but I think probably I saw I think a lot of the people I saw were kind of two-faced. Like they'd say one thing but act another way.
That's not authentic.
Yeah.
Red flag.
Red flag. I think that I got that from sometimes from my mom and sometimes from my dad. I think that was pretty common. I think sometimes it was realized later on, and then sometimes it wasn't, just depending on the circumstance. And I think that was largely a factor of like either self denial or just like genuinely not seeing the truth of the matter.
Right. Well, it's tough when you're a kid too. Sometimes you can't always tell. Like
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like my mom or my dad would sometimes go back later and be like, okay, yeah, like was being inconsistent there, or sometimes they would not admit to that. And I think that was either a factor of them denying it
right.
within themselves or just genuinely not seeing the truth.
Yeah.
Right. Um, I think it's interesting. I think most of the people who I've met that are less authentic tend to lean more left than they do right politically. I think most of the people who I've met who are like just blunt and don't give a fuck and just tell you how it is lean right, which is interesting. Like I don't know. I mean, I could theorize about why that is, but I would say that since I've come down here, I've met more people that lean right than lean left for sure. I think probably most of or maybe even all of the people I interact with on a daily basis lean right. And so most of those people I would say act relatively authentically.
I think a lot of left people lean authentically too. I
There
think
there probably are.
actually funny thought concept. I think that if someone is left or right, they're probably authentic. But if they switch back and forth dependent on the conversation, they aren't,
Funny.
right?
Yeah.
It's like if they shift to match whatever conversation is happening, then you're not telling me what you really think, you know?
I say that I think there are more right-leaning people that are authentic than left because I think that left-leaning people in broad strokes will dive into stuff like victim mentality or blaming other people for problems or virtue signaling, like we talked about last week, right? Like they'll dive into those things where they might say one thing, but their actions aren't aligned with what they say. Like I support, posting black squares on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
But then they don't actually do anything to help the Black Lives Matter movement or any movement that's similar to it.
Although to bring it back to the straw man from earlier, um, I don't think that posting a black square does anything. They think they're working hard, but I know Alex Ramosi works harder. So they think that posting a black square is doing something, even though I don't think that it is. So then they might be acting authentically in their delusion
Hmm.
in that sense, right? So it might be authentic. It just might not be like
So in conclusion, I just think people who lean left are delusional.
That can be true. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm mostly kidding, but
Well, it's like
funny.
if somebody thinks one way and then they say that way and then they act that way, regardless of whether or not you think that way is right or even
Is it
true,
authentic?
it's authentic, right? And so it's like if someone is all the way left, no guns, pro-abortion, anti-war, and they think, say, and act that way, that's authentic. And someone who's pro-gun, anti-abortion, and pro-military industrial complex, same deal. The issue is when you get someone who is dependent on the conversation, like they'll just tell you whatever you want to hear to make the sale, right? That's when I start to get sketched out because I can
Hard
happily.
salesmen are
Yeah.
the least authentic people in the world.
That's a great fucking example.
Yeah.
Because I would so much rather sit down and have a conversation with someone who I disagree with on literally every political topic, but can do so genuinely than somebody who's just going to tell me what I want to hear and then go on and do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. That pretty much covers what's important for me.
Mhm.
Do you have anything to add? Anything you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I can't think of anybody off the top of my head specifically today. And I think it's because the second I find someone who's not authentic, I cut them out of my life and I forget about them. And so it's not very often that I find someone who's not, I'm still here, boy, because they just don't stick around.
Right.
Or I don't know them well enough to recognize that they're not authentic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think also like for both of us, we probably only genuinely interact with like half a dozen people,
Yeah.
right? And so it's like out of those half a dozen have probably been whittled down from dozens and dozens of opportunities over the years to people who are authentic.
Right.
You know, just because authenticity is a subset of several character traits that you and I would generally value in someone.
Yeah. And I think that largely the class, like the cast of people that we hang out with are generally authentic because they don't have a whole ton to hide.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like I don't feel like they're generally doing. Some people actually do act inauthentically. So
yeah.
Hans had a problem with the owner of Kraken and Pauhana and stopped drinking there. So Hans went and started working at Kaba Tea Club. And at the time, Grace had talked to the owner of Kraken because Grace is working there and was like, I want to have my birthday party here. And they were like, awesome, let's schedule it. And then they didn't schedule it. They accidentally scheduled the bike night on top of it. Genuine mistake. And so Grace was talking to Hans about it because Hans and Grace were friends at the time. And Hans was like, dude, I work at Tea Club. We're doing a birthday party for me there. Why don't you come do it? We'll have a joint birthday party. And Grace was like, awesome. I'm excited. Thanks. And Hans was like, yeah, it'll be a fun bonding moment for us. And Grace was like, cool. And then I've heard from other people that since then, Hans went around telling people, hey, come to Kaba Tea Club. We're having like a birthday party out of spite because those owners at Kraken and Pauhana aren't good people. And so we went to the birthday party and we had fun unbeknownst to us. And then afterwards, everyone was like, hey, dude, that birthday party was kind of a shitty thing to do. And we were like, what are you talking about? And they were like, well, Hans said it was out of spite. And we were like, no, like Grace had the birthday party with Hans, like because they were friends. Like maybe Hans was having their birthday party at Kaba Tea Club out of spite and Grace's name just got mixed up in it. But like, that's not why Grace was there. And so it seems inauthentic from the information that I've gleaned. Because you're telling Grace that you're going to have the party there because you're friends, and then you're telling other people that you're having it out of spite. And that tells me that you feel spiteful, meaning that when you're speaking to Grace, you're not acting and speaking in the way that you're thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
I think that's the only person I can really think of off the top of my head who recently has acted inauthentically in my life.
I'm honestly my head is so stuck on the idea of like truth versus feeling.
Okay.
And it's like I'm kind of whirlwinding around the idea of like, does truth matter when it comes to authenticity? I'm just really curious.
This is my whole right and wrong is subjective.
I know, and mine is objective.
Yeah.
Which makes it challenging. You know, it's a challenging discrepancy between your line of thinking and mine, right?
Yeah.
But then it's all subjective, so why does it matter, right?
Just to support my line of thinking. Okay, let's move into section 3, which is why you might not be as authentic as you think you are. And I'll admit this is a little clickbaity. All right. But there is some truth to this sentiment. And I feel that because as I became increasingly more authentic, hang on, I read that wrong. I feel that I became increasingly more authentic the more I learned about what makes a person authentic. Why the fuck did I write that down? That's AIDS. The more I learned, the more authentic I became. That's a way easier way of saying that. That's right. Um, Looking back, I feel I've always been pretty authentic, but since considering this think, speak, act ideology, I've caught myself several times speaking in contradiction to my thoughts or acting in contradiction with what I was going to do. The more thought I dedicate, the more closely I can align myself with the kind of person that I want to be. Have you found this to be true as well? So the more you think about authenticity, you think, oh, I'm an authentic person. And then you catch yourself in the act going, hey, hang on a second. This is in violation of what I just cleaned as that.
Yeah, I think it's a product of, or something synonymous or similar to, ignorance is bliss. Like, if you don't think about how authentic you are, or you don't think about, how you're growing throughout your life, or you don't think about what you could do better throughout the day, right? Then you assume that you're doing well because you don't see anything wrong, right? But once you start to dig in and you really start to analyze and see, it's like the for every one thing you solve, you find 20 new ones that you could tackle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think that, as we go through these episodes and we talk about more topics, and we learn from one another and come away with something new from them, I try to implement those things into my life, and I find more and more potential for growth as I go on.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's hard to neglect the fact that I have grown to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, but I would say there's definitely been times where I've caught myself acting inauthentically. I think most of those times have been either on phone calls with parents, or with people at the bar, having small talk or whatever. And um, me not just being polite and then dismissing the conversation away, which would probably be a more authentic route, but like going out of my way to also ask them the same questions they're asking me, which is not something I need to necessarily do, but it's something that I like think I should,
Mm.
right? But my authentic self would be like acting politely, like you said, but then getting back to what I have to do,
Right.
right? I see myself stretch out of that box, and I do catch myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I catch myself, I probably started at catching myself 0% of the time, and now I catch myself 60 to 70% of the time,
Right.
right? And so there's improvement there for sure. But yeah, I think the more you look at issues like this in your life, the more you start to realize that they're there. Like,
Yeah.
just like if you were to close your eyes right now and think about all the things that are red in the room, there might be only like one or two that come to mind. But then you open up your eyes and you look around at all the red things, and suddenly you see like 5, 6, or 7,
Right.
right? So it's like you see what you're looking for,
Right. Right.
But what about you?
I now look for it constantly,
Gotcha.
all the time. And usually it comes up in, like, for example, this is an example of inauthenticity, but it's an example of exaggeration. I was at the Space Coast Crew Christmas party this past weekend, and I was talking to this one lady, because we're working on a project that someone else is working on at the same time. I think that our solution is better than this other person's. So then I went back to a different group of friends, and I was like, I just got done talking to this lady, and they were like, I don't know this lady. And I go, oh, okay. Well, this lady hates the guy who's working on the conflicting project. And someone else caught me and they were like, she doesn't hate him. She just disagrees with the way that he thinks. And I was like, okay, that's a fair assessment. That's right. I was exaggerating. Right. And so then I catch myself and I continued to speak, but then my brain immediately left the chat because it was like, why do I exaggerate that way? Do I exaggerate that way to like paint a picture and convey a point? Because it's not wholly accurate. It's an exaggeration. So why do I exaggerate to paint a
I
picture?
do something similar sometimes, and I think it comes from a place of comedy. I think it
Yeah.
comes from a place of like, um, it's funny to tell a good story,
Yeah.
and authentic stories aren't always good stories.
Yeah. Although in this sense, I wasn't telling a story. I was just like trying to give someone an update. Like I was updating
Yeah,
someone on a
but
project.
I don't know, like
It's
an
entertainment, right?
right, right.
It's
There's
more
an
engaging.
aspect of entertainment. I see this with, I think you and I quite a bit where it's like we'll tell each other stories about work that day,
Yeah.
and there's no need for it to be funny or exaggerated, but it's always a little bit more entertaining and it puts a little bit more of a smile on your face if it is,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and so at least for me, like when I tell stories like that, it comes from a place of comedy, even if the situation is not comedic in nature,
Right.
because I find that comedy and a good laugh is almost always beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
At least that's how I would see it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, is that how you think you see it, or are you still kind of pondering it and thinking about it?
Well, this situation in particular is tricky to me because I was giving someone an update. They're already engaged. There isn't a need to engage them more. I'm not joking necessarily, but I'm lighthearted. And it's a sensitive situation in which people do actually disagree. So I would argue with myself. It's important to be accurate in representing people in this situation because misrepresentation leads to misunderstanding and thus more argument. So So why did I exaggerate in that sense? Would I have exaggerated this way talking about, customers at the bar? Because I didn't say that Hans hates the owners of the Pauhana and Kraken. They might, but I don't know, so I can't say that with certainty. Similarly, I can't say that this lady with Space Coast Crew hates this other guy. I can't say that with certainty at all. I can say that she disagrees with a lot of his ideas, which is accurate to what the person who corrected me said. So why am I being inaccurate here and then accurate in that other space? And how many times does it happen that I don't catch it? Because I was literally like called out on this.
Right, right.
So I just have spent a lot of time in the past few days thinking about that and then catching myself doing it or not doing
Hmm.
it since then.
Do you think it's because um do you think there's a party that goes on to it goes into an autopilot mode of like, I don't really think about the circumstance around me. I just kind of think what I just like kinda
Say what
so hard to
happened.
find the words for what I'm trying to explain, but it's like
Autopilot.
it's an autopilot of like the words are coming from your internal perspective and your internal self-reflection, whereas there is a broader reflection that takes um a wider window to see, and
Yeah.
sometimes that window isn't always open. So you're looking through your window on autopilot, but then there's a bigger window here that if you had to constantly look through would be exhausting and tiring.
Yeah.
But then when you don't look through it can sometimes bite you in the ass too, right?
Yeah.
It's like an aspect of like that.
It's thinking of the situation from other people's perspectives.
Yeah.
Because from my characterized perspective, they hate each other. It's an easy way for my brain to just categorize it.
Right.
But the actuality of it is that they don't actually hate each other. They just disagree sometimes. But it's an easy way for my brain to just put it in a box and then put it away and not dedicate a ton of thought to it. So I guess what I can take away from that experience is this a situation in which perspectives are important and I should look from other people's perspectives and then consider that and portray it correctly? Or is it not that important? Because sometimes it's not important and sometimes it is.
Mm.
Generally speaking, this is something that I want to start practicing more often. Um, and I started kind of looking into this week. It's a little off topic, but it kind of bleeds into when you start thinking about something, you start to practice it more. So in starting to think more about authenticity, I've been starting to practice it more. Then similarly being caught with this perspective thing, I started learning about your vocabulary because it's called a lexicon. People have different dictates or lexicons, which is a way of speaking. So when you think about like, consider the way that Jay-Z talks. Now consider the way Donald Trump talks. They're very different, right? They have different words. They use
Or versus Obama versus Hillary.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
They
they're
have
all
different
super different.
different cadences, different favorite words, different phrases that they use, right? And that, much like your personality is malleable, you can change it. And so I found that for you to start using a new word regularly in your vocabulary, it must be done 38 times before it becomes a natural part of your lexicon. So it's kind of like you can't, like, it takes, I think it's like 20 repetitions to break a habit or something like that. 38 times to make it a part of your permanent lexicon. So this guy wanted to replace the word bucket with group. So instead of placing an idea into a bucket, you place it into a group. And so he literally wrote out sentences like 38 times and then used it like 4 days in a row or something like that in sentences. And then it just became part of his vocabulary. And you can change vocabulary similar to how you can change your body or your personality. Um, and this is a really interesting thought because it is malleable and it does change. And it's kind of like a skill. If you don't focus on it, then it becomes dull and, falls away, unless you do it so many times that it becomes second nature and you don't have to think about it anymore. But this made me think of the Alex Hormozy penny method, which essentially states you're not a loyal person because you've never cheated on your girlfriend, because maybe you've never had the opportunity to cheat on your girlfriend. You're a loyal person if you've had tons of opportunities to cheat on your girlfriend and you haven't. If you've only been given one opportunity, you can only put one penny on the scale. And that is going to lose out to someone who's had 5,000 opportunities to cheat on his girlfriend and hasn't. He's more loyal than you. So you're only as insert skill or personality trait here as often as you practice it. So if I consistently catch myself and stop myself from being inauthentic and instead choose to be authentic, then I will become a more authentic person.
Mm.
And I thought that was interesting, especially compared to the vocabulary, because the more times you use a word, the more it enters your vernacular. I thought they
Yeah.
paralleled each other.
I've worked on my vocabulary quite a bit over like the past 2 years-ish, I would say.
You speak gooder?
I think I do.
Okay.
I think I do. I don't know. I used to get a lot. I still get lost for words sometimes, but I used to a lot more often, for sure.
Are you trying to expand your vocabulary or just change it?
Be more accurate in the words that I choose,
Hmm.
I think is like the best way to put it. I used to try to combine a bunch of words together to create, a single thought, or essentially combine a bunch of words together to loop around one word that actually exists that I just didn't know, or that I didn't know how to use.
Got it.
And so I've tried to find those words instead.
Right.
And I still have to loop around sometimes because my vocabulary isn't perfect, and sometimes I just can't think of what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
But that's been an active point of my effort over the past couple of years, just passively.
Yeah. If you only ever used those words, no one would ever understand you because no one knows those words. If you sprinkle one in every now and then people will be like, "What's that mean?" And then you probably explain it anyways. You save
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Um, do you think you're as authentic as you can be?
I think that I thought I could be, and then I caught myself and I was like, "Oh, I'm actually not as authentic as I thought I was." So I definitely probably am not authentic as I could be because I still continually catch myself every once in a while, like about to say something that isn't in alignment with the way I think or feel.
Mm, mm.
But I'm getting closer. So for example,
Do you analyze that based on how other people react to it, or how you portray it in yourself?
how I portray it.
Okay.
So, like 2 months ago, it was a month before Thanksgiving. My parents are having like a rough patch. I wasn't sure if my family was going to have a Thanksgiving. So I just was up in the air with my plans. And Grace's family came to Tampa for Thanksgiving. And she, like a month before Thanksgiving, was like, "Do you want to go to Tampa with me and my family?" And I was like, "Nope." And that's authentic, right? Because at the time I was like, "Mm-mm." And she got bummed out and she was like, "I was kind of hoping that you would want to because like my family likes you and I like that you like my family." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's a month away and I don't know if I want to spend the time to drive to Tampa." Authentic, not rude, just authentic. And I wound up deciding to go of my own volition and I was really happy with how that went. And I was like, "Oh, that's an example of authenticity that I probably would not have been prepared for otherwise." So now my mom came to the bar the other day to drop something off for me, and she brought me the Christmas star to the Christmas tree, and she was like, "Oh, now that you have this Christmas tree, you should have me and your brother over for Christmas." And I was like, "No, thanks." And she was like, "Why not?" And I was like, "I just don't want to have people over." And she was like, "Well, but you have Grace over." And I was like, "I live with Grace. That's different. I just don't want to have people over." And I feel that if I had not had the Thanksgiving opportunity to just tell Grace no, then I wouldn't have taken that same opportunity with my mom. I probably would have danced around it and been like, "Oh, maybe," and like eventually said no. And it really bothers me when I ask someone about something and they say maybe and dance around it and then eventually say no. I'd rather you just say no initially because then I know how you feel about it and I'm not hurt. And so I have, through pursuing authenticity, have been able to be the guy who just says no the first time and not in a mean way.
Yeah, yeah.
So I guess to answer your question, I think I'm pretty authentic, but
Yeah, no, I would
they'll
agree.
probably be more so.
I would
I hadn't even considered that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about, uh, the urge to fit in and how you fight that, or, you know, trying to see your blind spots and tackle them and stuff like that. And I think a lot of those things stem down to authenticity
Yeah.
and seeking to be more authentic,
Yeah.
So I would agree. I was just curious. I
What
don't,
about you?
man, I think I get caught up in I don't even know if it's getting caught up in wanting to be polite or nice. I don't think that's quite what it is. I think I get caught like when I finish something and I'm happy and someone catches me at that point in time, I'm much more likely to say yes to something that I would otherwise probably say no to just because I'm in a good mood.
Mm.
Right. And so I think I have a hard time. I think my biggest challenge right now is recentering myself to a point where I can very consistently think about everything logically. Right? Because it's like when I've gotten relatively good about thinking through things logically when I'm upset, because that's something that I've actively tried to fight for many years now. So like even when I'm upset, I'm able to at least recenter myself to some extent and go, okay, let's figure out this out later. You know,
Mhm.
just put it on the back burner. You can come back to it. You'll feel better when you come back to it. Chill the fuck out. You know,
Division 79 t-shirts.
right?
Great
Yeah,
example.
yeah. Um, and so it's like that I've actively worked on and gotten better at.
Mhm.
What I'm not good at yet is kind of the other side of that coin where it's like I'm in a really good fucking mood. And then someone asks me like, hey, do you want to help me out with this one small thing? And then next thing I know, I spent 2 hours on it. Right.
Right.
It's like that still hits me. And I think the reason that it still hits me is because when I'm down and I'm authentic and I turn someone else down for something, it doesn't really make me feel that much worse because I already feel like shit. When I feel really good and then I turn someone down,
Mm.
it makes me feel just a little bit worse than I did.
Really?
Yeah, and like I feel a little bit bad, and that's something that like I have to actively fight. Like I feel bad saying no. I have a much easier time saying no when I'm already pissed off because it's like I just don't care. Like I'm already in a bad mood, like whatever,
No.
But it's like when I'm in a good mood, like those come less frequently for me. So it's like I want to cherish that.
Huh.
And it's like I have this internal battle to where I don't wanna say no because I know I'll feel a little bit worse, and, like, I'm feeling good today, and I haven't felt good in a week, so it's like I wanna keep it going, you know?
That's interesting because I'm kind of the reverse. I love saying no to people. And I love saying no to people because it means that I've just protected the time that I have to do what I want with it, and I can
Yeah.
recommit later if I want. But it's funny because you, when you're feeling up, are like, I want to feel this way forever. I'll do whatever. I don't mind. And then when you're
Yeah.
feeling down, you're like, fuck, I'm already at rock bottom. Who gives a shit? Right. But it's funny because when I call this the movie theater paradox, which is when everyone's excited about a movie, I don't even have to see the trailer. I fucking hate it, right? And when I see a movie that's really exciting, it's like, oh man, like I want to tell all these people about it. It's kind of like the opposite. So when you're in a great mood, I immediately try to bring the mood down. I try to say mean shit and I try to fucking drag the mood down to try to neutral you out. And when you're pissed off, I try to be extra fun to kind of counterbalance. I'm like
Right.
in a constant seeking of neutral. And I noticed
Just, like, throwing between 6th and reverse all the time.
pretty much, well, when you're happy, when I'm happy, you usually become more happy. And
Yeah.
when I'm bummed, you usually become more happy to try to like lift me up. So you're constantly trying to lift me up, and I'm constantly trying to drag you to neutral. Even if you're happy, I'm like, all right, let's put it down. And if you're bummed, I'm like, hey man, life's not that bad.
I come in super happy, you're like, "Man, your teeth look like shit."
Well, it's because I'm emotionally damaged and I live in a constant state of perpetual where I can't get excited or upset with anything. I just live at a fucking like 0 out of 10 and -10. And so everyone should suffer with me. But it's funny because I don't have a problem saying no to people because I don't feel bad about it and I don't feel excited about it. I just don't feel about it. So I am in a constant state of being able to say yes or no, like empirically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like, I don't know, once I
As
there are definitely examples in my life where I have been happy and still said no because I've been able to prioritize.
right.
But I would say there's a much greater tendency to say yes when I am happy than when I am sad.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's just like at the end of the day, like even for the people that I think about and I think like, man, what the fuck are you doing with your life? Like even for those people, like I still do care about them.
Mhm.
And like I still do like appreciate the fact that they, you know, are going about their days and, doing their thing and making friends and hanging out. Like that's still something that I think is awesome and like a great opportunity of life. And so like I'm glad that I'm really genuinely happy for them that they have that. And so I think it's like when I'm in a good mood, like I want to be a part of that. You know what I mean? Even if it's overall potentially detrimental to my time management or like what I really had to do in that moment. Right.
Usually when people ask me to help with something, my automatic default is no, but I can help you find someone who can.
Yeah.
Because
That's a good response.
generally speaking, I don't want to do anything to help you. You know what I mean? Like not you specifically, but like people in general, right? Um, but that's not always the case. It's like if it's someone who like I knew from college, like if a buddy who was in my fucking physics class from sophomore year of college was like, "Can you help me whatever?" It's like, "No, but I'll help you. I'll find you someone who can." Right? If it's a close friend of mine that needs help, I'll either make the time but do it when it works for me or find someone quality to help out.
Mm.
But generally speaking, I'm hesitant to do that shit just because like people are always going to need help and people are always going to whatever, and I want them to get their problem solved. I just don't always want to be a part of the solution because I want other stuff to do.
Yeah. Are there any things in your life that like you would give the shirt off your back without like them asking for it? You know?
Yeah, like the people closest to me, like
Yeah.
you and Grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. But most people, it's pretty much all of my closest friends from rowing. Um, what's an analogy we can pick here? Okay, how about this? Your buddy's car breaks down in Tampa, and they call you. It's 11 p.m. at night on a work night. Do you drive out to get them to bring them back, or not? Right. So if it's someone I'm close with, like you or Grace, it's like I'm on the way. If it's one of my rowing friends from high school or college, it's like I'm on the way. If it's someone who I was friends with in college, but like we don't talk to anymore, it's like, hey man, like get a hotel room, and then like I'll come get you tomorrow, or so like I've got an Uber app. I'll book you an Uber. You pay me back, something like
Yeah.
but only people who I'm close with will I drop everything for. And generally speaking, if I won't drive to Tampa right now to come help you, I probably am not going to help you do your brakes in 2 weeks. I'm
Mm.
probably going to just find you someone to get it done.
Consistency in that respect.
Yeah, generally speaking.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
But on the other hand, like I don't know, it kind of is situationally dependent. I usually don't have people asking me to help with shit though. And I feel like that's a byproduct of me constantly finding them a reference. And what I found is if someone asks you for help and you say, "Hey man, I don't have the time to do it, but I'm going to recommend you to this other person to help." If they don't reach out to that person, then it really wasn't that important to them in the first place. And they were just trying to like get through it easier because they know that you would say yes.
Right.
So if I've had someone at work, he owns a Honda, or a Mercedes. He owns a Mercedes, and he was like, "Do you know like this or that? Like, can you help me with like whatever?" It was simple. It was like an oil change or something. And I was like, "Oh, I don't have the time, but if you're looking for a good shop, Autobahn Restoration, Service and Restoration does European cars. They would help you out. It's a great reference. I'll give you their number." And he was like, "Okay, yeah." And like I followed up with him like a month later, and I was like, "Hey, dude, did you ever go to Autobahn?" He was like, "Ah, I just took it to the Mercedes dealership in Melbourne." I was like, "Okay," and that tells me, okay, I'm not actually like an important person to you. Like
Yeah.
you were just kind of looking for an easier way to get it done, and that's okay. I get it. I just was able to get out of that because I mean Audubon is a great reference. I would argue that I wouldn't send you to someone who won't do it as well as me, right?
That actually touches on a I'm glad you brought that up. That touches on a point historically that I think I've fought, which is in the past I have assumed that when people bring up an issue it is a genuine issue for them. Because when I bring up an issue, it is a genuine issue for me.
Right.
And so I assume that people act in the same way. Like if
Mhm.
they have a problem, they actually need help. Or if like they have like something that's bothering them, like this is actually a problem that needs to be solved.
Right.
Because that's how I felt. But I think a lot of people, and the more I go on and the more people I meet, the more I realize like people would just bring up problems to complain about them. Like
Yeah.
they don't actually want solutions. And like that's something that,
Or they want you to solve it for them.
right, but like they don't even want it bad enough to actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
Like like when you say they want you to solve it for them, like they genuinely just want you
Yep.
to solve it for them.
That's exactly
Like they don't want any input at all.
right.
Right. And it's like that always really baffled me. Like the more I started to see that, like that, it still baffles me to this day to some extent. Like I guess I've grown kind of numb to it just because I've seen it so many times. But like it's still very interesting to me.
Well,
Uh,
it's like you won't ask for help unless you need it because you're a DIY guy. If you can get it done yourself, you
right.
learn how to do it, you'll probably do it. You only go
Well, the only time you'll probably like hear like I need help is if like the jack stand has failed and I'm under the car. You know, that's like then I'll be like, all right, I can't get out. I better call someone.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. Right. You'll exhaust your efforts until you have to rely on someone else and then you'll bother them. But with
Yeah.
other people, they go, I'm only gonna do it myself if I have to, if someone else won't help me. The
Yeah.
reverse. It's the path of least resistance, right?
Mm.
So for example, if someone who you haven't spoken to since your sophomore year of college came up to you, met you at the bar, and you were like, "Oh, hey, Jimmy, like, nice to see you." And they're like, "Dude, like, if you need help with anything, like, I'll come over and do your laundry for you this week." Would you say yes? I would probably say no, just because I can handle my own laundry. Thanks, mate.
I would be weirded out, and I would definitely say no.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you a ton of people would be like, "Dude, free laundry? Absolutely. Come over, dude. Like, come
Mm.
fucking deal with it for me." Right? Because it's the path of least resistance. And it's interesting because those people are usually the people who don't have very much going on in their lives. Like, they don't
Yeah.
have a ton of stressors. They're not like trying to build a business. They're not working 3 jobs. They work one job that covers the bills and then they play video games. And
Yeah.
doing laundry is a hindrance because it takes away from luxury time. Their car is a pain in the ass. It takes away from luxury time. Someone else is just going to do it for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I think you raise a really good point too, because the amount of stuff that we tend to do throughout our weeks in comparison to people who we hear all the time say, I don't have time to do that,
Yeah.
is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And
You know,
there's
that
another
that dichotomy. I'm trying to learn this new word.
dichotomy. Dichotomy is when there's kind of like two opposites. And
Yeah, that's what I think it is, right? I've been trying to incorporate it. It's funny because I actually started incorporating it last week, and then we were talking about vocabulary
yeah,
today. But yes,
yeah.
dichotomy.
The dichotomy between you being happy and me wanting to drag your food. So
There we go.
another metric that I'll use when someone asks for help is I think to myself, in 6 months, if I need to ask them the same thing, will they help me?
Hmm.
And with my rowing buddies, the answer is usually yes, because we did everything together. So we'd probably do everything for each other, right? Car shit with you or cat shit with you, it's probably a yes, right?
Yeah.
But if it's like some random dude who's like, hey, can you help me with this thing? Would I depend on that guy if I needed him? If I were stuck in Tampa and I called him, would he even pick up?
Yeah.
And maybe it's a cynical way of thinking, but I think the answer is usually no, and therefore my answer is usually no. But Alex Hormozy, his input on this, in terms of saying no to people, is if your aunt invites you over for Thanksgiving and you say no, and then she gets upset about it, she's probably not going to ask you to go to the next Thanksgiving. Awesome. Now I don't have to go to this Thanksgiving and I'll never have to be bothered about Thanksgiving again. So I'm not worried about saying no to people and them getting upset because if the result is they don't ask me anymore, awesome. That's my end goal, right? So I feel like I don't get asked often to help people with things because they assume that my answer is going to be no, which is exactly what I want them to think, unless they're close to me. Like when Joel asked you to work on the car, he told me, he was like, dude, I didn't want to ask you because I figured you were busy with shit. And Joel didn't know that I hold him in high regard and would help him with them.
Right.
But that's exactly how I want it to be. I want you to assume that I'm not going to help you, and that if I do help you, you're almost honored because you're in rare air. Like I don't help most people with things. If I'm helping you with something, it's because I care about you, and I think that your time is worth mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your family example too. That's actually something I've been thinking about lately. Is the Alex Hormozy principle of there are no obligations, there are only consequences.
Yep.
Right. So it's like you don't have obligations to go see your family for the holidays. You just have consequences for not seeing them.
Yeah.
Or for seeing them. Right.
Yeah.
If you see them, you spend time with them that you can dedicate to other stuff. If you don't see them, you get an earful, and that's that. Right. Yeah, it's all interesting. All interesting. What
Yeah.
to think about from this podcast.
Yeah. Not bad for having recorded 3 days ago.
Yeah, no, it's good. I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
That-
pretty much all I got. I mean, I think I talked through all my points. I only had like
Me
one
too.
little sheet.
I had 2 back to back, but
That's okay.
I
There you go. That's the spirit.
yeah. We'll wrap it up then.
I'm dragging down your content by my content.
Attaboy, we're balancing.
There we go.
We end each podcast with a short segment called Dialing In. We've had a wide-ranging conversation. We talk about a lot of different things, and we kind of like to wrap it up and put a bow on it with one quote that surmises what we've talked about today. And today's quote is one of mine. True honesty will strengthen relationships that help you achieve your goals and unravel relationships that do not. Thanks for watching.